So what are some of the first things that comes to your mind when you first hear about guns in the United States? You're probably thinking like gun violence, mass shootings, or like just crimes being committed by guns, right? You see, the topic of gun violence and gun control has always been a heated debate, especially within politics ever since the early 20th century. Now, gun violence may easily pop into your head, and that's because according to Nerth Eisenman and Mark Silver, reporters for the NPR, the United States has the 28th highest death rate by gun violence, in which 4.43 out of 100,000 deaths are averaged as of 2017. Now we have to wonder, is it the gun or is it the person? But with those statistics, I can see why gun violence would probably pop into your mind. Now, as an undergrad student here at UNLV, majoring in criminal justice and working part-time law enforcement with the Nevada Army National Guard, I have been able to see both sides of this debate and see how this has evolved to what it is now within our country. Now, by understanding more about gun violence, you get to see both sides as to why people are either for or against gun control, but you also get to see my standpoint as to why I oppose it and why these strict gun control laws are not fair. Now, first, I will discuss the gun control problem and its evolution within our country. Second, I will then talk about the causes of why gun control has become such a big problem. And lastly, I will then talk about why I take the stance against gun control. Now that you know more about what I plan on talking about, let us now dive into my first point and talk about the problem of gun control. Now, gun control laws have one sole mission, and that is to strictly regulate the sales of guns to the American citizens, if not completely ban them from society. Now, these laws started coming into effect during the 20th century, especially after the assassinations of John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. Now, the main law that came into effect was the Gun Control Act of 1968, a federal law that basically prohibited the possession of a firearm if you were a convicted felon, a drug dealer, or if you showed signs of a mental illness. Now, along with that, many other laws were being passed at this time that strictly regulated and restricted gun sales, because these politics were thinking that by using these laws, there would be an end to gun violence, end to mass shootings, and just an end to all this craziness being caused by the gun. Now, here's one thing to note. These politics are thinking that it's the gun that just does the damage on its own. However, according to Samantha Benthian, writer for the History News Network, it is important to note that in recent mass shootings, the majority of weapons used in these situations were purchased legally. Now, it is the person, not the gun, that does the damage. Now, gun control laws, with them coming into effect now, they started experiencing backlash, especially from the National Rifle Association, or otherwise known as the NRA, because these laws were now violating the Second Amendment. Now, with the influence of the NRA, many politics decided to take the stance against gun control because these laws were now basically taking away a basic American citizen right. Now that you know the problem behind gun control, let us now take a look to the causes of why gun control became a problem. Now, one thing to note, as I've emphasized, gun control is the main cause, such as mass shootings, because they fuel the fire on if strict gun restrictions must be enforced. Now, according to the Al Jazeera website, we must make note of some of the most deadliest U.S. shootings that have happened within our country. And to highlight those, we have the Columbine shooting that happened in Littleton, Colorado, killing 13 and injuring more. We also have the Pulse nightclub shooting that happened in Orlando, Florida, killing 49 and injuring a lot more. And then sadly, we also have the coined as the worst shooting in American history, which is the Route 91 shooting here in our hometown that ended up killing 58 and injuring more than 500. With these numbers, we have to note, these numbers are truly alarming. Now, these mass shootings are always calling for stricter gun control every time they happen. You always see news stories about robberies happening with guns or any crime happening with the use of a gun. Any violent act that involves the use of this deadly weapon raises question on what action must be taken in terms of gun control. Now, many politicians and the NRA, as I mentioned before, began opposing gun control. Now, with more gun violence leading to more gun controls, we have to ask, how will the entire country be impacted should these laws come into effect? Now, I understand why some favor gun control, but now let us talk about why these laws are actually not a good idea, and let's talk about why I oppose gun control. Now, by banning guns, you are basically left defenseless at this point, which is why I oppose it. I want you to picture it. Pretend someone comes up to you and they have a knife in their hand, they're demanding your money, they're going to rob you basically. Now, in that instance, you do have the right to defend yourself, pull out a gun, and, shoot them if you have to, because you're basically in a life or death situation. Now, imagine if these laws are in effect, you don't have a gun, and you're in the same scenario. Well, I'm sorry to break it to you, but you're screwed at that point, if I'm being completely honest. Now, as I mentioned before, the gun control laws violates our Second Amendment, which gives us the right to bear arms. And this leads to so many debates happening and why these laws become so unconstitutional. Now, according to James Osman and Miguel Faria, authors for the National Center for Biotechnology and Information, banning weapons does not prevent violence and actually may further just encourage more crime because they know that we are defenseless now. So by keeping that Second Amendment and arming citizens, it would actually discourage gun violence because we can now protect ourselves. So banning guns, I get it, it may be a quick fix to gun violence, but they must think about the personal safety, as having no guns is actually going to affect it even more. Now, research shows that crime rates and gun violence will just go up, actually, if strict gun controls are implemented. Now, one thing to see here is that gun control just seems to just focus on the gun. Guns aren't responsible for the deaths. You can't just put it on a table and just expect it to shoot someone, right? Now, this weapon is merely just an object, and what causes the damage is the person picking it up and pulling the trigger. Now, my question is, why just guns? You can kill someone with knives, axes, bombs. Heck, you can even kill someone with a pencil, for crying out loud. See, so now that you see why I oppose gun control, let us now review what I talked about in this speech. By understanding the situation between gun violence and gun control in the United States, you see both sides of the argument, but also see why guns should not be banned and how gun control is unfair. I first talked about the problem with gun control and its evolution. Second, I then talked about the causes of gun control and how it became a big problem. Lastly, I then talked about why I oppose gun control and why guns should not be banned. Now, keep in mind, gun violence affects every citizen, whether they are a victim or know someone who was. Now, you must think about American safety. There may be crazy people out there, but will these strict gun controls actually make the world a better place? Or will it just make the world even worse than what it already is? Thank you.